Welcome to the Adoption and Foster Care Journey, a podcast to encourage, educate, and equip you to care for children and youth through adoption, foster, and kinship care. Hosted by an adoptive mom with over 22 years of kinship and adoptive parenting experience. She's on this journey with you. Please welcome Sandra Flach.
Write on a scroll what you see and send it to the 7 churches, to Ephesus, to Pergamum, Thyatira, Sardis, Philadelphia, and Laodicea. That is Revelation 1, verse 11, and I am your host, Sandra Flach. Welcome to the Adoption and Foster Care Journey, where we encourage and equip you for your unique parenting journey. As a mom of 8 myself, 5 through adoption, including our youngest 2 sons who are now adults at age 20 and 22. They still live at home. They were both diagnosed with fetal alcohol syndrome when they were little. So I get it. I understand the challenges involved in raising children and teens and young adults with trauma and prenatal substance exposure. So I'm here for you. We're on this journey together, and I'm grateful that you tuned in today. Please be sure to like and follow our social media pages for the Adoption and Foster Care Journey. We are on Facebook as the Adoption and Foster Care Journey, and we are on Instagram at AFC_journey. So I look forward to connecting with you there. Also, I always love to connect with you in person, and my 2026 traveling and speaking and teaching calendar is well underway. Just got back from filled a couple weeks ago. And then this week I am heading to Birmingham, Alabama, easy for me to say, where I will be speaking and leading an FASD conference for their foster and adoptive families at the church at Brook Hill. So I'll be there February 21st. And then I will be in Ohio for Mobilize Ohio on March 21st. That is at the North Canton Chapel. You can register for Mobilize Ohio by going to their website. The folks at Hope Bridge have it on their website as well. We have a link in the show notes. Super excited. I know Ryan and Kaylin North are going to be there. So, several other great speakers, and I'm getting to lead 3 breakout sessions. I'm super excited about that. And then at the very end of April, beginning of May, I will be at the Renew Retreat for foster and adoptive parents in Swansboro, North Carolina. That is April 30th through May 2nd. This is Jody Tucker's conference, Second Mothers. So it's always a great retreat for parents every year. And I'm going to be doing 2 breakout sessions there that I'm super excited about. So I hope that you get out there somewhere to be able to partake in these great opportunities for foster and adoptive parents. If you're interested in having me come and speak at your church or to your group, lead an FASD training or a foster adoption mom retreat, contact me, reach out. My email is in the show notes, and I would love to come to you, to your organization, to your church, or even do an online training as well. Do those as well. So reach out there. Now, today, we have a guest with us. We have Alice H. Murray. She is a retired adoption attorney who pursues her passion for writing with a weekly blog and faith column articles and online and print devotions. Her writing also appears in numerous compilation publications such as Guideposts and Chicken Soup for the Soul books and Short and Sweet series. Alice's first book, The Secret of Chimneys, an annotated Agatha Christie mystery, was released in 2023. But her second book, God Adopted Us First, Faith Lessons from an Adoption Attorney's Adventures. That's what we're going to be talking about today. It's an adoption devotional, came out in October of 2025, I believe. And Alice shares in there some of her journey from being an adoption attorney. So we're going to hear about that today as well. She also produces Murray's Motivational Moments, a weekly digital radio station on Christian Mix 106. She speaks there. And we have her with us today. She's going to share with us and encourage us. So please welcome Alice H. Murray. Hey, Alice, welcome to the show.
Well, good morning, Sandra. Thank you so much for this opportunity to talk to you and everyone else about adoption.
I'm excited to have this conversation and intrigued by your like 35 years as an adoption attorney. Curious what led you to adoption law? What brought you to that part of the work?
God did. God, it's all a God thing because I never even thought about, I mean, I didn't even think and know that people did adoption work. I mean, I was young and naive. I was in my early 20s in law school and I knew I wanted to go to law school and I got out. My husband was in the Air Force and we moved to Florida and I'm looking for a job and I couldn't find a job. I couldn't find a job. I worked part-time. And one of the attorneys there said, let me take you to this bar association meeting and I'll introduce you. And after he introduced me and said I was looking for work, and one of the attorneys came up to me, and if you read my book, that's who I call the boy attorney in the office. There were two of us, the girl attorney and the boy attorney. He was the boy attorney and said, I do adoption work and I'm a solo practitioner and I need help. Got into it, absolutely loved it. I won't go through the long involved story, but I ended up doing it full time and I absolutely loved it. But God orchestrated that. And I look back when I moved to Florida, I had to take the bar exam again. And it's like 2 days of essay questions for 8 hours. I
Wow.
don't remember a single question on the exam except for the first one. And of course, I had no idea I was going to go into adoption law then, but it was an adoption question. And I just thought, God's like, think about this. I just
Wow.
thought that was, but He put me there for a reason. And I think I still have a reason, even though I'm not actively practicing. I'm writing about adoption and sharing what I've seen and experienced.
Yeah, I love that. God directs our steps. I think many of us, even, listening, not everybody set out to become an adoptive or foster parent initially.
Hmm.
And many of us are doing that as well as ministry work that we never imagined. But when God writes the
Hmm.
story, right, and we're walking in obedience to what He calls us to do, it can be it's amazing. So, I am interested in what was that work like? Like share with us, what were the things you did as an adoption attorney?
Well, a little of everything, actually. Of course, I went to law school, so you had to know the laws because it is a legal process and there's a specific way you're supposed to do it. And I want to comply with the law, so I wanted to do that. So there's specific legal things you have to do. There's a case and studies and things that have to be submitted to the court. So I did that. But I also worked with the birth parents. In some instances, it was the birth mother and the birth father. Sometimes it was just the birth mother. And it's interesting because it was more of a counselor role than it was a legal role. Yes, I'd explain to them about the process of adoption, but most of the time they were looking for comfort and encouragement and guidance. And I thought, well, that's one reason God's placed me here because I can shine His light to them. I mean, I didn't get up on my desk and be a desk lawyer and wave my Bible, but just the way I treated the birth mothers, I mean, they understood I was different. I cared about them. I cared about their baby. I wasn't just there to, have a job and make money. And one case really stands out to me. There was a birth mother that came in, and she was a young teenager. It was a sad story, but anyway, she was a young teenager and didn't get along with her mom, and her mom was always kicking her out of the house, and she'd go stay with grandma or another relative. Well, grandma took her to church. Nobody else did, but she's bounced around here and there. And I explained the process, and we talked about what was going to happen. And she looked at me and she said, Miss Alice, when I have my baby, will you come to the hospital with and do the paperwork with me? I want you to be the one that does that. I said, oh yes, I always do that. and and I said, of course I will. And she goes, other than my grandmother, you are the only person that's ever been nice to me in my life. And I was just, I mean, that just broke my heart because I wasn't treating her any differently than I would anybody else. But I mean, when God says, let His light shine through you, I try and treat people like I'd like to be treated and how Jesus would want me to treat them. But she recognized that without me you know, giving any type of a witness other than the way I interacted with her. And I just thought that was so sweet that, she could see that. And I knew I was helping her and she needed that right then because she had a difficult life to begin with. And now here she is pregnant, and I think she was 14 or 15, and it was just heartbreaking. So getting just someone to treat you nicely, if that was the most positive thing that happened to her, but at least I could be there for her and do that. So I was an encourager with birth parents. And then, of course, adoptive parents. I had to work with adoptive parents. Many were foster parents and ended up adopting. Others had been fostering and then decided they want to find a child and adopt. So, again, that was also kind of a combined here's the legal end of it, and it's not just a legal process. It's just not. It's, human emotions and things like that. So, I helped them through that. So I jokingly say, yes, I have a law degree, but I have a PhD in psychology from on-the-job training.
I love that. And I can imagine how it's such a sensitive, you know, topic and conversation and just that whole interaction. I'm as an adopted mom myself, we adopted internationally. So we didn't
Mhm,
have our kids were in an orphanage, so we didn't have interaction with the birth mom. And then our other adoption was our daughter who came through kinship and her mom had passed away. So our daughter came to us when she was 8. So we didn't have that.
mhm.
But I do know birth moms who have made that selfless choice to choose a family to raise their baby and to be the parents of their baby, and not a hard, or sorry, not an easy decision, very hard, very difficult. And I love hearing how sensitive you were and are, and how the Lord used you to really minister to these moms.
One thing you said really strikes me because it is a choice and it's a positive choice. Now, it's not for everybody. I'm not saying that's the solution for everyone, but it is a choice and it's a loving choice. I hate it when people say, oh, you're abandoning your child when you place your child for adoption.
Or you
And
gave up your child for
or
adoption.
gave up like and I would always tell I first time I ever met with a birth mother in person, I would tell her this. I said, look, you don't need to feel guilty or bad. You are a mother. You're doing what a mother is supposed to do. You're taking care of your child. Now, how you're taking care of your child is you recognize you are not equipped for whatever reason, maybe age, finances, health, mental health, or physical health concerns, but you're doing what's necessary to make sure your child gets what he or she needs. That's the most loving thing a mom can do. So don't listen to these people that are, poo-pooing you and saying, oh, you're abandoning your No, that's the most further thing from the truth. If she wanted to abandon the child, she could have had an abortion if she wanted to. So I have the utmost admiration for birth mothers. Okay, they made perhaps bad choices in some situations, but we're all human, and God knows that, and God's got a solution for that through Jesus. So
Right. I love that. Love that. If I looked a little distracted a few minutes ago, I apologize. My dog suddenly barked really loud next to me because she saw a deer through the window. So for our listeners who are, or our viewers who are watching this on YouTube, the snow behind me is very real, and a deer just pranced through, and my dog went crazy and startled me. And then I
that's
quick muted, but that's what that was. That, we keep it real here, right? That's what that was all
it's
about.
real. It's all about real.
Yeah, yeah. So, Alice, over the years, because 35 years of doing this, any idea how many adoptions that you participated in?
Oh, let's see. It's hard to tell because adoptions have the numbers have gone down for various reasons over the years. When I started out, it was probably 50 a year, and then it kind of dwindled down, and that's kind of, where we are at the moment. But I mean, it's got to be 1,000 or more.
Wow.
So.
I
And each situation is different. The boy attorney in my office that I practice with, who is a strong Christian, he always used to say, "There's no cookie cutter adoption. Every case is totally different, and that's because you're dealing with individuals. They're each a unique creation of God, and they each have their own needs and the way to handle it. So." It was very interesting. I can never say I was bored at my job. If anything, it's like, time out. Let me
Yeah.
take a breath here. Because it was really like an emotional roller coaster. And I would tell folks that came in to adopt, the prospective adoptive parents, I'd say, adoption's like a roller coaster. You're up 1 minute, you're down a minute, and you know what? There's that poem by Longfellow about the girl with the curl in the middle of her forehead. When she was good, she was very, very good. But when she was bad, she was horrid. And I said, that's how an adoption goes. If the adoption goes through, because a mom can decide not to place, but if you're matched and you receive a placement, that's a miracle. That's a huge blessing. But if something happens to the baby, or if mom decides she's going to parent, which is her right, then of course you understand, but you're still heartbroken. So there's not like any in between. So highest highs and lowest lows. It's terrible. And I've had to tell people things have fallen through, and that is not, yeah, those are all seared into my memory because it's horrible. It's like, here, let me take a knife and twist it in your heart. I
Yeah.
mean, because up here, until the consent's signed in the baby's place, but still, we're all human and have emotions.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a lot of emotions involved. And you shared the one story about the young girl. Any other stories that stand out that are special to you?
Well, I have a funny one.
Yeah.
Adoption's not all tears, and the funny one I have, and I'm still in contact with this adoptee who's in her early 30s now. So, as I said, I did it for 35 years, but her parents were looking to adopt. We had them matched, and back 35 years ago, hospitals were not as adoption friendly as they are today. So this was a newborn I was placing. They would not let the adoptive parents come to the hospital to receive the baby upon discharge. They required the attorney to come. So here I am with the baby carrier and the clothes, and I go get the baby. And of course, I called the parents and said, okay, I'm going to pick the baby up at the hospital. Where would you like me to meet you? Because we were both from out of town. It was a hospital about an hour east of us. And they said, well, we want the baby as soon as possible. Where can we meet you near the hospital? And I'm thinking, hospitals in this big commercial area. There's, shopping malls and fast food restaurants and things like that. I'm like, I don't know what's. And I said, oh, well, there's a Pizza Hut that's next door to the hospital. And they said, sure, we'll meet you there. Well, as it turns out, it was lunchtime when when I finally walked out of the hospital with a baby, got in my car, drove over to the Pizza Hut parking lot. The place is packed. I mean, and people are looking out the window. I get out with the baby, so they're all looking, and this couple's already there packed, and they saw me with the baby, and they start crying, and they run and grab the baby, and I'm like, I hope nobody thinks I'm selling a baby at the Pizza Hut parking lot. But it was so sweet because they could not wait. They didn't care where it was. The thing to them was to hold that little baby that was going to be a new member of their family. It was just wonderful. So the adoptee and I are still friends on Facebook, and whenever it's her birthday, I'm like, "Happy birthday, Pizza Hut delivery baby."
Aw, I love that. Is that common? Are you still connected with any of the other adoptees you helped place?
It depends. A lot of the and I am in contact with some of the birth mothers too, but that's a little bit different because sometimes they just want to let me put that behind me because the consequences of, how she got pregnant may not be something pleasant. But yes, I still remain in contact with a lot of the adoptive parents, with some of the adoptees, and probably fewer of the birth mothers, but that may be more. I don't think it's anything against me. I think it's we just that's kind of a
The
tough
nature of
time
it.
in their life to remember. So, they just kind of put that aside. But I love to hear from people because, you put a baby and then, okay, well, what's the rest of the story? What
Yeah.
happens? And here's another this is a God story. So I had a pastor and his wife that contacted me, and they said, we've been praying about adopting. We can't have children biologically. And God has told us that he wants us to adopt a little girl. Okay, well, so we start looking and looking. Well, then they called me, months down the road and said, "Hey, we have found a baby to adopt. There's a pregnant woman that a member of our congregation knows, and she's heard about us, and she would love to place the baby with us." Now, she had not had an ultrasound yet. So, as it turns out, when she had the baby, it was a boy. And I'm
Uh-oh.
like, it was so funny because I'm up at the now this was a little bit later, and the hospital did allow the adoptive parents to come up there. So I'm in the nursery, and they're just taking pictures, and I'm like, okay. Other things in mind. But you know what? I've been in contact with them on Facebook, and their son, who's now probably 20, he wants to be a pastor too.
Aw.
So you never know what's going to happen in the long run. And that's one thing I love about adoption because it's biblical. I mean, look at Moses. He
Yeah.
was adopted, and God had a plan for that. I don't know that Pharaoh's daughter was planning, but she took that baby, and he was raised in Pharaoh's palace. That was the most advanced education system that they had in the world at the time. So he learned languages, he learned government, he learned how to deal with people. And look, later on, he's charged with take all these million people and move them from point A to point B and set them up in a community that's organized and efficient. So, God's got a plan. It's not just that moment in time. It's not just we want you to have a baby. God may have plans way beyond, that for that child, for everybody involved, but especially for the child.
Yeah, I love that. And I see that with my own, with my own kiddos. We adopted internationally a sibling set of four
Oh
from
my.
Ukraine, actually, way, way back when. And just to see, what God is doing in their lives and through
Mhm.
them. And I have grandchildren now. A couple of them have had, married and had babies. And it's like, I hold my grandchildren and I'm in awe because I feel like we would have never had these precious little ones in our family. They wouldn't be here if, we hadn't said yes all those years ago to yes, Lord, we'll adopt, right? Not that we did any great thing, but just being able to be part of it is an honor and a blessing. And just seeing how the Lord is writing their stories is something, and now, especially because we did adopt them from Ukraine and knowing what's going on over there now, and just the medical things that we had to deal with when they first came home and all of that. It's like, I don't even, all of them wouldn't probably be alive right now if we hadn't said yes. And again,
Absolutely.
nothing great that we did, but God certainly had a plan for their lives, and putting them here and in our family was a part of that, and redeemed their lives. So, we just never know what God is going to do. And, it might be a twisty, turny path, but He is working it out for good. And we, as long as we're keeping our eyes on Him, we can be a witness to that for sure. Um,
Well,
Alice,
I know God has a sense of humor because my current husband is an adoptee. He's an international adoptee. He was born in Turkey. And his parents, his dad, adoptive father, dad, was in the U.S. military, and he and his wife adopted. And my husband says, I am so glad I was adopted. I don't feel, like my life was terrible or I've been ripped away from my parents. He said, I know because we saw in the birth certificate, he actually got a birth certificate from the orphanage. The parents were very young and they couldn't provide. And he said, I know if they hadn't placed me for adoption through the orphanage, that I probably have been a street orphan and probably would be dead by now.
yeah,
So, but the faith connection is what really grabs me because it's not just about that child. It's not about us and our family. Yeah, it is about us and our family, but it's not just our family. It's God's family. We're expanding God's family because they're exposed to our Christian beliefs. So they get not only the legal forever family through an adoption, but then they get the real forever, forever family as a member of God's family because they're exposed to and hopefully will accept Jesus. And so the consequences are so high And you think of all these poor children that are, in foster care, not, I mean, being bounced around, not
Yeah.
foster, anything negative about foster parents, but the system moves them around or doesn't give them as much as they need. But nobody could replace the love of, a stable, loving family that's permanent. And God knows that. That's why we're going to have an eternal family and be in a home with Him forever.
That's right. And in your book, and I'll hold it up here for our listeners who may be watching this on our YouTube channel, but it's entitled God Adopted Us First. Now, my first book is a memoir, and it's titled Orphans No More, A Journey Back to the Father. And I talk about our spiritual adoption as children of God because from being an adoptive mom, the Lord started showing me those similarities between adopting children, here on earth, and how that is really a reflection of our spiritual adoption. So you kind of touched on that a little bit, but what else have you learned about spiritual adoption, having been an adoption attorney all these years?
Well, if you look at it from the attorney side, which I know a lot, and that's one reason I felt compelled to write, because I have seen so many things that nobody would have this perspective. But when you handle an adoption, especially when I did infant adoptions, and even when it's a minor, you don't have a lot of control over your life. So you have to rely on other people. And with an adoption, a choice is made. And the adoptive parents may make a choice, we're going to adopt this child. So God had a choice. He
Mm,
had a choice. It wasn't us that came up with something. He loved us so much that he made a choice that he wanted to add to his family. Because you can't do an adoption unless you have someone that's willing to take on all the obligations of caring for a child. And God didn't just want to make us, oh, you're okay. He wants to make us heirs. He wants to make us part of his family. I mean, that was significant back in Rome. If you were an heir, there was so much that was attached to that. And adoption's ancient. And back in the Code of Hammurabi, they actually had a whole chapter on adoption. So this has gone on forever. But that's significant. God had a choice, and he chose to take someone on and add him, that person, to his family.
mm,
And you see that because people have a choice. When I did adoptive placements, the birth mother had a choice. Do you want to choose this family? Or the family may say, let me look at the information on the situation. Do we want to pursue this? I mean, you may have looked at medical information and said, no, we can't handle that.
right.
So, the willingness to take that on and to care for somebody forever. I mean, and I always said in my adoption final hearings, because I would have to inquire of the adoptive parents for the judge, and I say, you understand, if you adopt this child, you can divorce each other, but you can't divorce this child. This child is yours forever. This is a huge responsibility. And
Yeah.
that's how it is. I mean, God makes a choice to take care of us forever. So that's so significant to be adopted into his family. And I think the Christian human family is a reflection of that. And we need people to see that. And that's why I think it's really important for the church to get involved with adoption and foster care. I mean, you can reach kids. I mean, imagine what's going to happen if they go someplace that's, they're not exposed to that. I mean, yeah, we want them to have food and clothing and whatever, but the spiritual condition, that's something that's an eternal issue that needs to be resolved.
Yeah, I know some of the things that I had seen and that I wrote about in my book is like you mentioned, we get, the children get a new family. Like we get a new family as Christians. We're in the church. We get a new name as well,
Mhm.
right? We can be identified now as Christians, and our
Correct.
children get a new name, so they're getting a new last name, they're getting a new family. And so much of that is reflective, and they get a new home. We have a home, right, in heaven waiting for us. And I think one of the big things too that stood out to me was, our children now have a hope in a future they didn't have before. And we
Correct.
as believers have a hope in a future that we wouldn't have had before if we weren't following the Lord. So there's so many aspects about the physical adoption of children that reflect our spiritual adoption as children of God. And I just love that part of the story. And I know you talk about that in your book as well.
Well, one thing I wanted to say is even when it's an adoption and it's mom and dad adopting a child, that child gets a whole bunch of family members and they've got a community. And that also mirrors the Christian life because, we're supposed to be in community and doing life together. And you've got that encouragement and support, not just from your family, the nuclear family, but from relatives, church members. I remember one time, I think it was a youth pastor that and his wife that were adopting. And usually I did the adoption final hearings just in the judge's, they call it chambers, but it's just his little office, which is, it's a nice size, but it's small. And he said, well, a few people from my church are going to come from the final hearing. I don't know if we could fit in the judge's office. And so I called the judge's assistant. She said, okay, well, we can do it in the courtroom. That's fine. You would not believe how many people showed up, all their relatives, a whole
Mhm.
bunch of people from the congregation. And those are people that are going to surround and love that child. I mean, yes, mom and dad are important, but like they say, it takes a village, and that's the Christian community. So it was, relatives, but I just could not believe how many people showed up. The judge was really impressed. But that's what you gain. You're going to be surrounding this child with love, not just from mom and dad in that nuclear family, but from the whole Christian family and community.
I love that. And because, my kids that were adopted internationally, it was just us and our
Mhm.
facilitator in the courtroom. And then when we adopted our daughter through kinship, we had some people at the courthouse, but we had a big party afterwards.
Mhm.
But I have two nephews and a niece that were adopted through foster care. My brother-in-law and sister-in-law adopted, and a whole bunch of us from the family did show up. They did have to have it in the courtroom because there was so many of us. We filled the
Mhm.
place, and the judge was just, he was in a celebratory mood. And I think the fact that we were all there just really meant so much. But it is true, grandparents and aunts and uncles and a whole church family. And there's so many people that become part of that child's family. Just like us, we have a church family and we have all of the fellow believers, right? So, and we speak into each other's lives and encourage one another. And it's another reminder of how, adoption was created by God, and we can see a reflection of that between our spiritual adoption and the adoption of our kids.
And also to foster care, although I mainly did domestic infant placements, we did handle adoptions out of foster care. And sometimes some of the things I would see, the people that would serve as foster parent, I know not everybody's like but that's why I'm so insistent that, churches need to get involved. So you may not be able to adopt and have the legal family relationship with a child, but even if you can love on them for a while and show an example and care for them, I mean, that's so important because some of the people that go to do foster care, I'm not saying everybody, there's bad adoption attorneys too, but it, they're in it, oh, we'll just get the subsidy and then they don't spend it on the child.
Yeah.
But the key thing is, even if it's a short time, even if you can't adopt, that foster care experience is so important for a child. If you've never had love and encouragement, even if you only get it for a few months, that's so crucial. And you expose them to God's love. I wrote an article for a Christian magazine, and it was about a foster care couple, and I have the utmost respect for these people. They were foster parents for 35 years. They only took infants, newborns, and usually with medical issues. Can you imagine getting up for a 2 o'clock feeding? I mean, we're talking about babies from the hospital. And they prayed over every single baby that they had. It's just amazing. They willingly did that. But the giving the love that's so important at the beginning and the prayer over that, and they continued to pray for those children even after they were no longer in their care. So, I mean, the importance of foster care, I can't emphasize that enough.
Yeah, it is ministry, and I know
Yes,
so
it
many
is.
especially in the Christian church, so many believers will step up now and do foster care, not just so much to adopt. There's a lot of reasons people
Mhm.
pursue foster care and adoption, and not saying anything's right or wrong. But I haven't become, we didn't become foster parents. We took the training classes, my husband and I, but we already had this house full of kids with high needs. And the
Right.
Lord just kept kind of closing the door to us, going any farther with that. But with what I do professionally, we advocate, for families to get
Mhm.
involved in foster care and adoption. And I know so many folks now who look at foster care as ministry. They
They do.
didn't step into it to be able to adopt a child. They're just there to be able to minister to not only that child and meet that need at that time, but also many will minister to the birth parents and be a big proponent of helping reunification happen. We know that that is the goal really of foster care. So sometimes a child needs that temporary safe place, right? And then they can be reunified. Sometimes it does become an adoption, right? Sometimes we can actually help families so children don't go into foster care, right? So there's lots of ways to be involved.
Preventive, yes.
And every step of the way, as we pray over the children, and then like you said, even when the children get reunified, when you can continue to pray for that child, and even the short time they may have been in our homes, and we're planting those seeds and we're loving on them and introducing them to Christ, right? It's ministry, and we sometimes may never know the fruit that will come from that. But that is, this is way more than just, you know, when we say adoption and foster care, it sounds like, oh, adoption and foster care, but it is really ministry.
Oh, yeah, it's definitely, and it should be a lifetime thing. I mean, if you're a parent, I don't care if your kids leave the house, you're still going to have an impact and an influence on them. And even if someone's in foster care and moves to another foster home or they reunify or whatever happens, you can still pray for them for the rest of your life. So,
Right.
the influence you have is so great. And people think, you don't have to go to Africa to be a missionary. You can be a missionary right here, even in your own home, loving on a child. The purest form of religion, what, caring for widows and orphans? I mean, kids, helpless kids, you know, they need love. They need God's love, and we're the hands and feet that need to show it.
Sandra Flach, host of the Adoption and Foster Care Journey podcast, and FASD educator Debbie Raymond, invite you to join Hope for the FASD Journey, a virtual support community for parents and caregivers raising individuals with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, diagnosed or not. This faith-based support community meets online 3 times each month, features special VIP guests, and a private Facebook group for members only, which includes Soul Care Saturday video devotionals led by Sandra and Deb. Both Sandra and Deb are adoptive moms raising kids with FASD and facilitators of the Facets neurobehavioral model. For details and to register, visit justicefororphansny.org/hope-community. That's justicefororphansny.org/hope-community.
So, Alice, I have a copy of your book, God Adopted Us First, Faith Lessons from an Adoption Attorney's Adventures. And I know in this book you share many adventures. Of course, you kept names and things, everything's confidential. But why did you write this book? What was the inspiration for it?
Well, I think adoption gets a bad rap in the media a lot of times, and I think people really need to understand adoption, and they need to understand its adoption to the connection between adoption and the Christian faith, because it was very discouraging for me. I had one instance where it was the birth father's parents were against an adoptive placement even though there was no way the birth mother and birth father could care for this child. They really just could not. He had been arrested for DUI, I think twice, and was on house arrest. Yeah. So he's had a drinking problem, and the birth mother had some mental health issues, and she knew, I just can't do it. And I thought it was very, mature of them to say, we need to get ourselves fixed. We don't want to mess up and then hurt somebody else. This child needs a stable, loving home. We just are not in a position to do that. And they chose a wonderful Christian family. But the parents of the birth father are like, oh, you're abandoning your child. You shouldn't do that. God never gives you anything that you can't handle.
Mm.
And I was like, adoption is not a sin. I mean, adoption's all over the Bible. I mean, Jesus was effectively adopted by his stepfather on earth. And, there's other stories of adoption, which I touch on in my book, but it's got such a bad rap. And then in the media, it's just like people are buying and selling babies. I mean, there's bad actors in every area, but the majority of people that I know that work in the adoption field, and I know quite a few, I'm on the board of directors for the Florida Adoption Council. Everybody is not in this for money. They are in this because they love children. Most of them are strong Christians, and they just feel like this is what they need to do. But people need to understand about adoption. So they need to understand it's biblically approved, and they need to understand how important it is to our society to take care, not just get a baby and go on. We need to deal with the birth parents, the adoptive parents. I mean, there's trauma all around. And who can see it better than I have seen it from all different perspectives. I mean, the birth mother sees her perspective, but I deal with birth mothers, birth fathers, social workers, judges, the hospital, so I see all of these different perspectives that other people don't. And sometimes when you see it from somebody else's perspective, they can say, oh, well, I didn't consider that. And it's like these parents just want to adopt just so they can add to their family. They got the house, the car, they just want to throw money. I had one woman, a beautiful couple, she'd had 12 miscarriages. She just was not going to have I mean, she'd been through trauma. She's not just out there to buy a baby. I mean, there's trauma for everybody, but the light at the end of the tunnel is it's a God-approved way of, adding to his forever family. And people need to understand about that. And they need to understand the position of all the people that are involved in these situations. I have a couple of stories about judges in there and social worker and, but there's a lot of people that's involved in an adoption process. But I felt God's telling me strongly, I mean, you've got to share these things. I mean, I witnessed miracles. I mean, there's just no other way you could explain it. And, I don't know how you could do adoption work and not believe in God. I mean, there's just no way that would have happened if God had not intervened. So
Wow.
I just had to get the word out.
Yeah. And I love the book. It's really a devotional. You've written it like
Yes.
a devotional. There are 40 short chapters, great for reading one a day. I usually read one at night when I go to bed. It's my little reading before I go to bed. So tell us more about what we'll find in the book, because you've got the scripture, you've got some thoughts at the end of each chapter, some questions if
Yes.
the reader wants to go through that. And of course, every devotion, each one of these 40 short stories includes one of the stories, like the Pizza Hut baby story is in here because I
That's in there.
remember
Yes.
reading. And of course, everything's confidential. You don't name names and
Mhm.
identify people. But what else will readers find in this book?
Well, I specifically chose 40 since that's a biblically significant number. Obviously, I've done way more than 40 adoptions, but each of these struck me in a different way and showed something. And believe me, I learned about God and got closer to him doing this work. So I said, if I'm learning faith lessons, I want to pass them along. So and somebody told me, one of my friends I grew up with in church, she said, this is not just a quote adoption devotional, although it touches on, this is something people can learn about faith regardless, even
Right.
if you're not an adoptee or adoptive parents, that people can learn. But it's 40 stories, true stories of things that I went through. I have not included anybody's name. I do have a picture of the Pizza Hut couple with the baby. They provided that to me. So I had their permission to do that. I didn't put their name in there, but there is a picture they wanted to share. So there's 40 different stories, true stories. Then that's followed by a devotion that captures a faith lesson that I learned from that particular experience. There may be more than one, but I focus on one. There's a scripture that's involved, the devotion. And then I have a little section with questions, and it's called Baby Steps to Grow Faith. And talking about that specific faith topic, what could I do, or what should I be looking at, or what should I think about differently from this situation and this particular scripture and devotion? So it's entertaining, yes. It should be informative. So it's entertaining, informative, and it should hopefully inspire people to grow their faith, or hopefully touch them and to consider that, oh, wow, God's real. Look at that miracle he did. So I want it to bless anybody. I was out selling books I live near a military base, and I went to the base exchange and I was selling my books, and there was a guy at another table selling like the New Age stones and stuff like that. And he came over and said, "Is your book religious?" It's got a cross on it. I said, "Well, I am a person of faith, and I wrote this from my perspective. I'm just telling what happened. I'm not trying to, preach a sermon and tell you to, turn from your sin or anything like that." I said, "I'm just saying what I experienced, what I've seen, and what I feel I have learned, and I want to share with others." And he goes, "Well, that sounds really intriguing. I think I'm going to buy that and read it." So I've been praying for him, because he said, I'm spiritual. I'm spiritual, but I'm not religious. So I hope maybe it'll open people's minds, not just about adoption, but God. I mean, he cares about us. He loves us. He loves us so much, he wants us to be a forever part of his family. So there's various parts there. A story, learn, enjoy. It was funny, my brother read the book. And he said, he texted me and he goes, "There were so many emotions in there." He said, "I laughed, I cried, sometimes at the same time." Because some of it is like, this is such a crazy situation, but it's so sad. So it's a wonderful book. I enjoyed, I for years I wanted to write it, and then it took me a long time to get it published. But I just love the book. I love the cover. If you're involved in adoption, you can see the adoption symbol on the front of the book. It's got the heart and the adoption triangle for the triad. And then I added the cross on the top, because my book is the spiritual aspect of adoption. So,
Yeah, I love that. And so the audience for your book isn't just foster and adoptive parents or prospective foster and adoptive parents. It's really for anybody.
it could be. They always tell you when you write a book, you don't say you're going to write for everybody, because not everybody's, but I don't want to limit it. My main target would be people that are touched by adoption, whether you've, considered adoption, you fostered, you have adopted, you're an adoptee, you made a placement. Those are the people I feel that are going to gravitate toward it, because they want to see, well, what was somebody else's experience like? Or wow, that happened to me too, where I'm not the only one that feels this way. So that's my main audience. But like I said, my friend said, these faith lessons, that can be for anybody. That's not necessarily limited to, I think the first story in the book is about a lady that gets a last minute call. One of the first stories, the last minute call about a placement. The girl just came to the hospital, had a baby, and the baby was being released the next day. And I called her at work, and she's like, she was so joyous. And then my theme was, how do we express our joy? Are we joyful for what God has given to us? How do we do that? Do you make a joyful noise? What's the noise? So, you don't have to necessarily connect it to adoption. So I don't want to limit it, but I would say, people that are already familiar with the area or have been through it are probably going to be gravitating to that. But I don't want to limit it, because like I said, a guy that I met at the base exchange, who's spiritual, not religious. I don't think he was adopted, and but he was interested to see what I had to say and what I'd learned from being in that area, because it's a kind of cool area. It's not something that happens all the time, and there's a lot of privacy involved in it. So a lot of people are like, I don't really know what happens. And if you rely on the media to tell you, I don't know if Juno was an adoption movie. I don't know if you ever saw that, but it was about a teenager, a boyfriend. She gets pregnant, and they're trying to pick a family. And the adoption attorney goes to her house. Yeah, that's true. I've gone to crazy places to meet with birth mothers. But this woman comes in, and she's like in this three-piece suit and this severe bun, and just, that's not true. Most of the people I know, whenever I met with a birth mother, I tried to dress casually. I didn't want to I just wanted to have a conversation with her. I didn't want her to be, oh my gosh, I'm talking to an attorney, or what do I
Right.
say? So it's like they give some impressions of, and no, everybody else I know does the same thing that works in adoption. So, I don't want people to get the wrong perspective about, and the media that I've seen. It's not people that have been through it.
Right, right.
Just
I'm
makes a
even
good story.
Yes, and I'm even thinking about even our parents who are listening, the adoptive and foster parents that are listening. I think it would make a great devotional for your children's grandparents. Like, my mom has passed on, my mother-in-law has passed on, but I feel like, they would have loved this book because they have some perspective on adoption. They loved their grandchildren that came through adoption. And it would be just a great, everybody loves a great story. And these are true, real life stories. And then we can see the life application with the scripture and the lessons learned. So I think anybody who has any kind of connection to adoption would really enjoy the stories in the book and the faith lessons as well. So I think it's a great read. You have some other books that you have written as well, not so much exactly like this, but I was intrigued about the other genre that you write.
Well, I grew up, and you'll think I'm going way off topic, but when I grew up, I was a huge Nancy Drew fan. I don't know if anybody else read Nancy Drew, but the reason Nancy Drew came into existence was because of Agatha Christie mysteries. And Agatha Christie wrote books, sold millions, and the publisher's like, we got to find something for the teen market so we can make some more money. So I was stuck on Nancy Drew. Well, my brother sent me a book about Nancy Drew, and I found out Agatha Christie was the inspiration. I got involved with reading Agatha Christie because she is actually a strong Christian. I read her biography. I was like, who would think somebody that wrote mysteries, especially if it's a murder mystery, as we usually see, like Death on the Nile, how could they be a Christian? But she's a strong Christian. If you start reading her books, she has scripture. She's not going to say this is in, Psalm whatever, but she'll have like the chapter, a sparrow fell,
Hmm.
and Christians get or she was a Jezebel. She's got the scripture references in there. You read her biography and she goes, I feel the closest to God when I'm writing because I'm made in the image of my creator and I'm creating writing. And mysteries are the ultimate morality play because we know somebody did something wrong. Somebody's going to go after them. They always find them, and then they get their just desserts. And of course, hers are clean stories. They're not, like they are today. So I've written a couple of annotated Agatha Christie mysteries, which are just so much fun. And when I say annotated, I just add a bunch of bonus material so people can understand what she was writing about 100 years ago. She wrote them in 1920s. So I've got recipes from the time, pictures of the cars of the time. Here's a place she's talking about. This is what this word means, or this is the slang phrase they're using. So it's a lot of fun. So I've got two Agatha Christie mysteries out, and then I write a lot of magazine articles and devotions. So I stay busy writing. But my heart was really in. That was the first thing I sat down and wrote. Now it took me years to get it published, but that was really the first thing that I did. And I don't know if you're going to ask me this, but why do I feel like I had to do that? Well, I started reading my Bible, and I've been reading my Bible, but I started to read my Bible one day, and I'm in Revelation, which I admit is not my favorite book of the Bible. But I came to Revelation 1:11, and it just struck me like a lightning bolt. It says, write these things on a scroll, because John's seeing this vision. He says, write these things on a scroll and send it out to the seven churches. And he lists the seven churches. And I'm like, he is telling John to tell people what he has seen that nobody else has seen. I'm
Mhm.
like, nobody has had the experiences I have. Nobody's going to know about it or what I learned from it or what God's trying to tell us if I don't write it down. And the seven churches, well, that's the entire church. Seven's the number of completion. So if don't just write it down and like, hey, brother and sister, read this. Isn't this cool? No, He wants everybody to learn about adoption into his forever family. So that just really inspired me. Now, that may mean something different to someone else, but that's what I felt God was speaking to me. It's like, I put you there for a reason. So while you were actively practicing, you were helping create these families. But now that you've retired from actively practicing, that doesn't mean adoption's behind you. You can still share the experiences that you had. You can still encourage people and change their perspective as to how positive it is and how faith building it can be. So that really, really meant a lot to me.
Yeah, I love that. I was going to ask you about the verse because that's the verse that I opened
I
with.
didn't want to I didn't want to
Yes,
pass up on that because
no problem.
that's
Love it. That was from Revelation 1, verse 11, I
Revelation
believe.
1:11. So everybody can rush to their Bibles and try and say the seven churches' names.
Love it. Love it. So, where can our listeners find your books?
Easy peasy, go to Amazon. You can Google Alice Murray, or you can Google adoption. God adopted us first. That'll bring that up. The two Agatha Christie murders are The Secret of Chimneys. I don't know if anybody watches Netflix, but they have the Seven Dials mystery that they just put up on Netflix, and The Secret of Chimneys precedes that. It's got some of the same characters in it. And the other one's The Murder of Roger Ackroyd. I know murder doesn't sound very Christian, but as I said, it's the morality play. They're gonna find it's not shown on. It's just off to the side. That's the other, and that was voted the number one crime mystery book by the British Crime Writers Association of all time. And
Wow.
why? Because she introduced the surprise twist ending. So everybody now, you get it. It's like, what? It wasn't the butler that did it. It was actually the mother. She introduced a surprise twist ending as to who actually did it. And then everybody followed after that. So it's excellent. But I
Brilliant.
had fun learning stuff doing those too. But those are all on Amazon. And I
Love
have
it.
an author page I've written things for Chicken Soup and things like that as well, but the three main books, those are all mine.
Well, we will definitely put a link in the show notes. And you also have a website, a blog. Tell us about that.
Yes, I have two, well, one's a column. I have a Feet to Faith column on Pathos where I try to get something out every week or two, and that's a religious site. So I write about religious topics. It can be anything. Um, this past one I was writing about, and it's current events. Um, they are restoring, I guess is a better word. They're restoring The Last Judgment, Michelangelo's painting that's in the Sistine Chapel. So I wrote an article about that gives links and people can see pictures and what they're doing and what it signifies and why that was put in the Sistine Chapel. So that was kind of interesting. So that's a faith-based thing I put out. And then I have what I call Alice in Wondering Land. So I'm Alice, and of course everybody's sort of Alice in Wonderland. So I'm in Wondering Land. So I'm like, you'll read a news item and like, I don't know where this is, or I don't know what they're talking about. So I try and find news things that are of interest to me and kind of do a deep dive. And my voice is when I'm not doing a devotional, although sometimes I throw a little in as humor. So I always throw in these, humorous comments or humorous way of looking at some of the things that are happening. And people get a deep dive into, you get this much in the newspaper or online, and then you can learn all about someplace or what's going on. So I enjoy doing that because I'm learning. And one of my writer friends says, I don't like to watch the news. I just like to read your Alice in Wonderland blog every week so I can learn something. It's not biased. I mean, I'm just giving you the facts and it's a little humor about what's going on, and it can touch on, various things. Flesh-eating bacteria in Florida, that's humorous, right?
So,
Or mice taking over the Coast Guard station and they all had to move out. Why did the mice get there? Because they were all eating Cheetos and whatever their snacks, and it fell on the floor and all the mice came. It's just
oh my goodness. So, if you want to, it sounds like you've got a lot of uplifting content and serious content. So, what is your website address?
what are you asking about? It is Alice Murray, author Alice Murray at Wix website.
Okay. And I
It's
will
on
put a
Wix.
link. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I don't have it memorized, but
No,
it's author Alice Murray and it's wixsite.com, I believe it is.
that is no problem because I will make sure that we put a link in the show notes if our listeners want to go check out. It's Alice, and say it again, your
So
blog.
the blog is Alice in Wondering Land.
In Wondering Land. So all of that is on your
Wondering
website. So we'll make sure our listeners can find your books and your blog and all of your things. Because you do offer so much encouragement and inspirational writing. So our audience is primarily foster and adoptive parents. I had shared that with you. I'm an adoptive parent. So it's a hard journey, as you can imagine. You've seen all three
Yes.
sides of the triad, but would you close us out with some words of encouragement for our listeners?
Well, I think you're being the hands and feet of Christ by ministering to children in need. And I know that's tough. It is tough because some of the kids that I've seen in foster care, they've been abused, neglected, whatever, and they have lots of problems, and it takes lots of love. But Jesus would love them, and he wants you to shine the light on them. And that's so important for them, their life eternally, not just right now. I mean, we want them to have a great place, but so much is riding on it. And just to provide, I mean, I, I don't know where I'd be without what my parents did for me. They were strong Christians, and that contact, that praying over them, that's just priceless. And I encourage people to continue to do it. I will be praying for all of you because I know it is difficult, but the payoff in the eternal is so great. So just hang in there. I know it's not easy. I mean, even if you raise your own children, it's not easy, but it's even harder when, the children come with issues already. And even if you adopt an infant, they may have some issues later too. So, just hang in there. God has a reason for putting you where you are and to help out with his family through your family.
Well, thank you so much, Alice, for sharing your story, for the decades of adoption attorney work that you've done, and for sharing about it in your book. Again, it is God Adopted Us First. So it's a great devotional for anybody who has even a little bit of an interest in adoption or foster care. You don't have to be a foster adoptive parent, but it definitely is a great devotional book. So thank you for writing the book, and thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for letting me have the opportunity to share and meet virtually and talk to folks that, I admire everything that they're doing. Keep it up.
Thank you. And thank you for tuning in to the Adoption and Foster Care Journey today. Here to inspire, encourage, and equip you for your parenting journey. And I hope you were inspired and encouraged by my conversation with Alice Murray. Be sure to check out her website. We will put a link in the show notes. Her devotional book, God Adopted Us First, is just a great resource. I think really not just for foster and adoptive parents, but really for anybody in our lives who we think would really enjoy, reading an adoption, a book about all these little adoption stories. And it's just a great read and a lot of encouragement and a lot of positive inspiration. So I hope that you will check that out. So in addition to this podcast where we want to encourage you, we've got lots more resources on our website that will help you with your parenting journey. You heard about the Hope for the FASD Journey online support community, which is a huge support to so many families who are raising kids exposed to alcohol in utero. Of course, I offer one-on-one parent coaching for parents raising kids with FASD, and our online and in-person trainings and workshops on the topic of FASD and any brain-based disability. So you can find all of our resources at justicefororphansny.org. Just click on the Adoption and Foster Care Journey. And there is a link, of course, in the show notes. Be sure to subscribe to this podcast, leave a review. And if you would like to watch this podcast, you can check out our episodes are all posted on our YouTube channel at Justice for Orphans. And again, I am so grateful that you spent your valuable time with me today, and I'm thrilled to have you along for the journey.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Adoption and Foster Care Journey podcast, brought to you by Justice for Orphans. We hope you were encouraged today. Please be sure to subscribe to this podcast and leave a review, and share it with your fellow foster and adoptive parent friends so they can be encouraged too. Be sure to find and follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Justice for Orphans, and check out our website for vital resources at justicefororphansny.org.